Hi everyone, it's Katrina. If you love myths, you've come to the right place. There are plenty of crazy stories about monsters and lost cities, but did you know that some of the places from myth are actually real places? Today, we are diving into the real history behind some of the wildest myths you know, and maybe even some you don't. So hit that subscribe button and get ready to explore these incredible places. The ancient city of Tyre. Tyre is one of the oldest cities in the world that hardly anybody has ever heard of. It is more than 4,000 years old and was home to the Phoenicians. It was once conquered by Alexander the Great. According to the city's myth, it was founded by the ancient god Melkart. If you've heard of the god Melkart before, you deserve a round of applause. When it comes to bizarre ancient deities, it doesn't get much more obscure than Tyre's patron god, Melkart. He was associated with colonization and the sea, but little else is known about him. The Phoenicians didn't write very much down about their legends, so historians just know the god's name, not many of his stories. It was in the city of Tyre where Europa is said to have been born. Legend has it that she was a beautiful Phoenician princess, so beautiful that she attracted the attention of Zeus, king god of Olympus. Zeus abducted Europa and took her to the island of Crete. She would go on to have Zeus's sons and marry the Cretan king Asterius. Then Europe, the whole continent, was named after her. It's hard to find an ancient city with this many myths attached to it. And who knows, a lot of them could be true stories, not just myths. Europa could have been a real princess. Founded in 2750 BC, Tyre prospered for 2,000 years before attracting the attention of a very real king. You might recognize his name from the Bible. In 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II, king of Babylon, laid siege to Tyre for 13 years. 3 centuries later, Alexander the Great showed up. What followed was one of the most legendary sieges in human history, assuming it went down like the history books say. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great was busy conquering the known world. No big deal, just building the biggest empire anyone had ever seen early in his 30s. When he arrived at Tyre, he demanded they lay down their arms and surrender without conflict. Not wanting to be destroyed, the city's rulers presented Alexander with gifts. Alexander was happy, so he said that he would offer a sacrifice in honor of their god Melkart at the city temple. When Alexander tried to do that, the priests stopped him. They said it would be sacrilegious for a foreigner to offer any kind of sacrifice to their patron god. That wasn't quite what Alexander wanted to hear. Everything had been going so well, but now he was insulted. You might say he went overboard with his reaction. Keep in mind that Tyre is on an island in the Mediterranean Sea. Alexander dismantled the mainland city of Ushu and used the stones from their buildings to construct a bridge to Tyre. And then he pushed his war machines across the bridge, laid siege to the city for 7 months, and battered down its walls. Tyre was destroyed. 30,000 people were either massacred or sold into slavery. Alexander destroyed everything in the city, furious that they dared defy him. They could have just let him into the temple, but instead their whole city burned to the ground. The origin of Goliath. Some oddly gigantic remains have been found in the biblical city of Gath, hinting at the possibility of real giants. Gath was the Philistine city where, if the Bible is to be believed, Goliath was born. Goliath. You remember him, right? He stood about 20 feet tall, had a bad attitude, and fought a little guy with a sling and lost. Well, this Goliath character is legend to some and a real historical figure to others. Those who believe in the Bible believe that both King David and the giant Goliath existed. They lived around the end of the 11th century, 1,000 years before Jesus, and 3,000 years before today. The issue has been finding proof of either figure. But now, things are getting spicy. Gigantic ruins have been found in Gath dating to the exact time that David and Goliath had their epic battle, according to Aaron Mayer, excavation director at the historical site in Israel. Aaron said that even though 2 decades of excavations have yet to reveal an inscription conclusively confirming the site to be Gath, experts are certain that it is. Evidence has shown that it was a large Philistine site and that it was destroyed around 830 BC. According to the Bible's Book of Kings, that's exactly what happened. Gath was annihilated by King Hazael of Damascus. Alright, but what about the giants? Everyone wants to know about the giants. Aaron said the team discovered a series of fortifications built using very large stones. Actually, his exact words were, extremely large stones. They also found walls from the 11th century built with burnt brick. The point to take home with you is that ancient architecture appears to be much larger than what you would expect to find in an ancient city. The oversized ruins don't prove that Gath was populated by 20-foot-tall titans, but it does suggest the people who lived here were larger than average. I even have some numbers to prove it. The newly uncovered fortifications have walls about 13 feet wide. This is compared to sites from the same period found in other places that are only 8 feet wide. Even the bricks that were used to build the structures were bigger. Most places used ancient stone blocks of about 1.6 feet in thickness. The stone blocks found in the 11th century layer of Gath are between 3.2 and 6.5 feet thick. Is this real physical evidence that Goliath existed? The real giant Goliath, just like in the Bible? And if giants existed, doesn't that open up the door for other creatures to have existed? Mermaids, fairies, unicorns, where does it end? The tomb on Minotaur Island. Archaeologists have discovered an ancient tomb on an island that may have once been home to a mythical creature. For 3,500 years, this tomb remained untouched and undisturbed. Then a local Cretan islander came across it by accident. They stumbled upon an underground cavern that had been sealed using some clay. The local got in touch with archaeologists who sent a team of students to the scene. The students found a vaulted tomb roughly 13 feet long. It contained 2 skeletons of people who died during the Bronze Age, at some point around 1400 BC. That was back when the island of Crete was ruled by the mighty civilization of the Minoans. The Minoans rose to power on the Greek island more than 1,000 years before this tomb was carved into the earth. They flourished for 12 long centuries as a real-life Atlantis. They were an island nation with sophisticated technology and an advanced culture. In 1900, British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans discovered the lost capital of the Minoan civilization, the ancient city of Knossos. Knossos is said to have been home to King Minos, not King Midas with the golden touch, but King Minos, the man who built a labyrinth for his stepson. His stepson was not quite human. He had the body of a man but the head and tail of a bull. Minos' wife, Pasiphae, had been tricked by the sea god Poseidon into what can only be described as bestiality. She fell in love with a snow-white bull and gave birth to the legendary Minotaur. Mythology is creepy. You know how it goes. The Minotaur was a horrible monster, so the king locked it in a labyrinth. It's kind of sad if you think about it. It wasn't the Minotaur's fault it was born a monster. The labyrinth was Minos' idea, but was designed and built by famous inventor Daedalus. The same Daedalus who fashioned a pair of wings for his son Icarus, who then flew too close to the sun and died. To feed the Minotaur, King Minos sent young men from his enemy state of Athens into the labyrinth to get lost and be eaten. This went on until the Athenian hero Theseus saved the day by slaying the Minotaur. But is it real? I'd like to see the bones of this beast if it really existed. How about you? Knossos has been called the oldest city in Europe, with its first settlers arriving 9,000 years ago. That's a long time. There's a huge underground complex and a ton of history here. However, it wasn't until about 4,000 years ago that the Minoans started building great palaces, and presumably a labyrinth. Around 1700 BC, a series of earthquakes shook the island. By 1400 BC, the Minoan civilization had been destroyed and was on its way to extinction. It's believed they were destroyed by a seemingly endless string of earthquakes and tsunamis. Even before the discovery of Knossos in 1900, scientists flocked to the island of Crete in search of the labyrinth. In 1415, Florentine priest Cristoforo Buondelmonti visited Crete, but all he found were some old ruins, those of Knossos, buried underneath the rubble. In the 19th century, Captain Thomas Sprat began exploring some caverns underneath the island. The caves at Gorton proved to be a real subterranean labyrinth. the captain believed that he had stumbled upon the truth behind the myth. But this cave labyrinth wasn't home to a beast. Instead, the caves may have been used by King Minos to keep Athenian prisoners. King Minos really had a thing for labyrinths. The natural caves could easily be used to keep prisoners that would later be fed to the Minotaur. More recent excavations have shown that there could have been an elaborate labyrinth underneath the palace of Knossos itself. So, could there really have been a half-man, half-bull? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And now for number 9. But first, it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Will F. and Crash for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Underworld with the Mapuche. One of the most remote art installations in the world can be found at the edge of a cliff in Chile, looking out over the sea. It's a place that most people will never see in their lives. Chiloé Island, smack dab at the farthest northern reaches of Patagonia. This art piece was made to honor the indigenous people and their legends. It was made by artist Marcelo Orellana Rivera. It's called the Dock of Souls, a small pier that references an incredible tale from Mapuche mythology, a tale of dead spirits and a cantankerous ferryman who charged a fee to cross. Prior to the 1800s, the Mapuche dominated the lands of Patagonia. They were proud warriors who, since the arrival of Europeans, have had a tough time. Prior to Christian missionaries, they had a rich and exciting culture. The Mapuche believed in a ferryman named Tempilcaue, whose job was to ferry the souls of the dead across the vast stretch of water to the underworld. Tempilcaue was just like Charon in Greek mythology, who ferried the dead across the river Styx. Both of these eternal ferrymen required a payment for their services. Charon demanded a coin. The Mapuche's post-life ferry service cost a small turquoise stone known as a yanca. The Dock of Souls is a physical manifestation of the mythical ferryman's dock. The Mapuche believed he came to the edge of Chiloé Island to pick up departed souls and leave with them across the ocean. Those who couldn't pay were stuck on the island forever. Locals say that if you listen closely, you can hear the tortured cries of the souls stranded for the rest of eternity. And while it's easy to dismiss paranormal ferrymen as myth, who really knows what happens after death? Do you? The birthplace of a Japanese goddess. On Japan's Kyushu Island, Takachiho Gorge is a hot tourist destination. One look, and it's easy to see why. The gorge seems like something from a green fantasy, with waterfalls spraying mist down the rocky cliffs. It's beautiful. But the gorge isn't the only attraction here. People also travel to the town of Takachiho to see the birthplace of a goddess. Unlike other mythologies that are ruled by gods, in Japan, Amaterasu is the queen goddess. She is the ruler of all kami, the divine beings of heaven and earth. She is the highest deity in the Japanese pantheon, the Zeus of Japan, only without any thunderbolts. Amaterasu is the goddess of the sun, making her more similar to a god like Ra from ancient Egypt. According to legend, Amaterasu was attacked by her younger brother, Susanoo. To escape his wrath, she hid in a cave in Takachiho. But once she was out of the world, things got dark. Without the sun goddess, there was no natural light. Everything in the world started to die. Thankfully, the other gods and goddesses joined forces to rescue Amaterasu and bring light back into the world. For the last 1,200 years, Takachiho Shrine has stood at the exact spot where Amaterasu supposedly landed when she arrived on Earth to hide from her brother. Whether the goddess exists or not, people still believe in her. Every night during the midwinter season from November to early February, a ceremonial dance is performed at Takachiho. It is a reenactment of the ceremony the other gods and goddesses did to lure Amaterasu out of her hiding place. The Mausoleum of Tangun. Can you name one archaeological site in North Korea? I'm thinking that most people can't, and for good reason. You can't just stroll into North Korea and start taking pictures of pyramids. Wait, North Korea has pyramids? They have at least one, called the Mausoleum of Dangun. There is such a crazy story behind this pyramid that you're going to want to pay close attention. I've talked about the mythical origin of Korea before, but just lightly. Now I'm going to give you the full scoop. 4,000 years ago, the first Korean kingdom appeared. It was called Joseon, and its first ruler was Emperor Dangun. He was an actual god. Joseon wasn't just on the Korean peninsula. The empire was vast, stretching from the shores of Korea deep into mainland China. This all started around 2333 BC. As for the whole god thing, that's tricky to confirm, as these things can be. Legend has it that Dangun was the grandson of Huanin, who was a god living in the heavenly realm. Huanin's son Huaneng didn't want to live in heaven anymore. He wanted to go down to earth and be immortal. So that was what he did. Huaneng descended to earth with 3,000 followers. He established the city of Cincy and ruled over the humans there. He wanted to be noble and help humanity. If you pick this story apart, you can find parallels with other myths around the world. God's Son being sent to Earth to heal humanity sounds an awful lot like the story of Jesus. A powerful entity descending from heaven with thousands of followers sounds sort of like Satan and his fallen angels. You could even look at it like Huaneng was an alien who came down from the heavens. Why? The same reason the Anunnaki did. To rule over humanity as a powerful super being. Whatever Huaneng was, god or alien, he wed a human woman, and she gave birth to Dangun. Dangun would go on to establish his capital in the city of Pyongyang, the current capital of North Korea. He supposedly ruled for the next 1,500 years and then retired as a mountain god. Just like characters from Sumerian, Egyptian, and Christian myths, Dangun ruled for an impossibly long time. That's the myth. Now let me bring you into the reality. The leader of North Korea from 1948 until his death in 1994 was Kim Il-sung. He was the founder of North Korea and was convinced that Dangun was a real historical person. He had North Korean archaeologists locate the grave of Dangun. They found it weirdly fast. In October of 1993, North Korean academics excavated what they said was the mausoleum of the God Emperor of Korea. They found 86 human bones. When they dated the bones, they proved to be more than 5,011 years old. The next year, in 1994, North Korea built a huge pyramid above the site of Dangun's grave. I don't know why they did it, but they made the pyramid out of 1,994 blocks of stone. Maybe to commemorate the year? There is a ton of controversy surrounding the mausoleum. Some think the North Koreans lied and that they never found Dangun's body at all. What do you think? The Cave of Wonders. There is a cave in Thailand that is out of this world. At the right time of day, sunlight beams through the roof of the cavern and falls directly on a small gold and green pavilion. It looks like something from a fairy tale. It's a snapshot of a fable, the kind of place you'd see in an Indiana Jones or Star Wars movie. But it's not a movie. This is real life. Phra Nakhon Cave is in Thailand's Prachuap Khiri Khan province. Legend has it the cave was found a little more than 200 years ago when a local ruler got stuck in a storm. He was forced to abandon his ship and seek shelter at the first place he found. Nobody knows if the legend is true or not. The pavilion wasn't built until 1890. King Rama V visited the cavern, which had become a popular tourist site with Thai locals. He had a small mound built in the cave and the golden pavilion put on top. Ever since, it's been a hot destination for kings. King Rama VII visited the cave and left his name etched on the wall. Even the late King Rama IX visited the cave. And you can too, but be aware it is not an easy journey. You can only reach the magical cave by traveling 110 miles from Bangkok to the small village of Bang Phu. Then you have to either hire a boat or hike through the impossibly humid forest to the entrance. Let me know. Are you up for it? Trolls and where to find them. There is nowhere in this world more closely associated with trolls than Norway. If you're going to bump into a troll guarding a bridge, it will be somewhere in Scandinavia. But why? And where exactly can you track down a troll these days? Trolls originate from Norse mythology. They've become part of Norway's cultural identity. Visit Norway and try not to buy at least one magnet with a troll on it. In Norwegian myth, there are a bunch of different kinds of trolls, and they each have their own special name. There are mountain trolls, there are underground trolls that live in caves, there are trolls who live along the coast, and there are even frost trolls. Then there are the trolls everyone is familiar with. The cranky ones that live under bridges and demand you pay them a toll for crossing. In Norwegian, they are called brukol. Trolls are typically giant in Norway, which might just be why they are said to live in the very real land of the giants. Jotunheimen National Park. The park is home to the 29 highest peaks in Norway, the landscape looking like it was made for trolls. There is a mountain called Trolltinden, which means troll peaks, and there's Trollveggen, the troll wall. In Norse mythology, Jotunheim is the realm of giants. All across this dramatic land are reminders of trolls and giants, but whether you'll see one with your own eyes, you'll just have to keep them peeled. The Cave of the Aztec. According to Aztec mythology, the Aztec people originated from a deep cave somewhere in Mexico. Like creatures emerging from a million years of hibernation, the Aztec crawled out underneath the sun and established their society. It sounds crazy, but there might be some truth to it. The Aztec were not the only ones with an origin story that involved a cave. Throughout Mesoamerica, various forms of the myth existed. The ancestral Puebloans of the American Southwest, also sometimes called the Anasazi, had a similar legend. They believed their ancient ancestors came from somewhere underground. Could there be a secret underground city somewhere in North America? A city where the truth of every Mesoamerican culture is hiding? The Aztec called it Chicomostoc, or the place of the 7 caves. It's been found described in codices and drawn on maps from the days of the Aztec. They always documented it as the same thing, a huge subterranean hall with 7 giant chambers. I don't know, it sounds a little cramped to me. At the pre-Aztec city of Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun stands tall enough to block out the real sun sometimes. Underneath the ancient structure is something most people who visit the site don't even know about. There is a cave beneath the pyramid divided into 4 chambers. It's similar to Chicomostoc, only with 3 fewer chambers. In the Mexican state of Puebla, at the site of Acatzingo Viejo, there is another cave-like altar similar to the one at Teotihuacan, only it has 7 chambers. Sadly, it was also partially destroyed when a road was built across it. A similar construct is at La Quemada in the northwest. There are places all across Mexico depicting a huge 7-chambered cave. Yet nobody has even found the real Chicomostoc. Does it even exist? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. The Islands of the Cyclopes. If you had to land on an island inhabited by mythical monsters, which monsters would you choose? I have a hunch it wouldn't be Cyclopes, since they like to eat people. Yet there is an ancient tradition that claims some islands off the coast of Sicily were home to giant Cyclops thousands of years ago. They are called the Cyclopean Isles, formed around 500,000 years ago by volcanic activity. They are very close to Sicily, visible from the coastline near Mount Etna. The Isles are most famous for their basaltic columns, reminiscent of the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. But there is another thing the islands are famous for that most people don't know about. According to ancient poet Homer, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, the islands were home to rampaging monsters. When the hero Odysseus visited Sicily, he found giants. These were no ordinary giants, as each one had a single bulging eyeball in the center of their forehead. Odysseus was on his way home to Ithaca when he and his crew met the one-eyed behemoths. He ended up getting stuck in one of their caves. The giant Cyclops Polyphemus killed 2 of Odysseus's men and blocked everyone else from escaping his cave by rolling a huge boulder in front of the exit. Not to worry, Odysseus had a sneaky plan. He patiently waited until the giant was asleep, then jammed the Cyclops' wooden walking stick into his single eye. The Cyclops was blinded, and Odysseus and his surviving men were able to escape by clinging to the belly of a ram. The Cyclops thought they were sheep and put them out to pasture. Finally, they were able to escape back to their ship. There's never been any physical proof found that Cyclopes are or were real, either on the Cyclopean Isles or anywhere else in the world. But who knows? Maybe they were descendants of even older giants, maybe even the Nephilim. However, while the huge man-eating giants may not have existed, enormous skulls have been found with a huge hole in the middle. For example, this skull is at least 3 million years old and belonged to a huge creature standing 9 feet tall and weighing 6 tons. But it wasn't a man-eater. It was an ancient elephant that went extinct long before the Greeks arrived. But in ancient times, bones like these proved that Cyclops were real. Sherwood Forest and Robin Hood's last stand. Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the poor, making him the hero of the people. Or did he? Was Robin Hood even real? Today, Sherwood Forest is 375 hectares of magical woodland. 500 years ago, it was where Robin Hood lived along with his outlaw friends, known as his merry men. In those days, in the late 12th century, Sherwood Forest was nearly 40,500 hectares. It had a single road leading through it from London to York. It was known as the Great North Way. Anyone who traveled the road was at the mercy of bandits and outlaws who lived in the dense woodland. The first literary reference to Robin Hood is from 1377, in a manuscript stored at the British Museum. It's a copy of William Langland's The Vision of Pierce Plowman. The old document claims that Robin Hood was born around 1160 in South Yorkshire. The document is convincing, but listen to this. Did you know that in the Middle Ages, sometimes petty criminals in England were known as hoods or hoods? It was kind of like how you might call someone a hoodlum today. Or maybe hoodlum was more 40 years ago. Robin was likely a nickname for Robert. Robin Hood essentially means Robert Hoodlum. This has led some experts to dismiss the whole story of Robin Hood as nothing but fantasy. Even though his name starts appearing in the 14th century, there are not enough records to confirm him as a real person. What there are records of are multiple Robin Hoods mentioned in court documents from Wakefield during the reign of King Edward II. That was between 1307 and 1327. These weren't brave heroes, but meager criminals tried at court. The idea of Robin Hood was likely nothing more than that, an idea. There were many Robin Hoods, or rather petty criminals named Robert. The stealing from the rich and giving to the poor wasn't a thing until 1492. That was when the oldest known ballad about Robin Hood was published. It's called The Little Jest of Robin Hood. In the story is a line that reads, "Robin did poor man much good." 30 years later, Scottish historian John Major started making things up. He wrote that Robin Hood never permitted any harm to women. Robin Hood never stole from the poor. Instead, he stole money from abbots and gave that money to the less fortunate. John Major transformed Robin Hood into a romantic hero. At the end of the day, it's impossible to know if Robin Hood was a folk hero or a myth. I'll leave it for you to decide. Perhaps somewhere in Sherwood Forest, first recorded in 958 AD as a sprawling woodland, there is evidence of Robin's exploits waiting to be found. The Caves of Hercules. How would you like to follow in the footsteps of Hercules? Or, more accurately, how would you like to sleep in the same place where Hercules slept during one of his 12 labors? There is a cave in Morocco where the strongest man to have ever lived allegedly stopped to rest during his quest to steal apples from a magical land. It's every bit as awesome as it sounds. But before we get into the cave, let's start with the protagonist. Hercules, demigod, son of Zeus. Hercules was what the Romans called him, but his original Greek name was Heracles. That's Heracles with a hard A and the C sounding more like a K. Zeus, as he so frequently did, had impregnated a human princess named Alcmene, who gave birth to Hercules. Normally, Zeus would have gotten away with his infidelity, but this time his wife Hera found out and she was angry. Can you blame her? Her husband was the king of gods but couldn't stop making demigods all over the earthly plane with random princesses. Hera tried to have Hercules killed by a pair of snakes that she snuck into his crib. He was too strong, though, and strangled the snakes with his bare hands. After an awkward childhood and some uncomfortable teen years, Herc was strong enough to punch a dragon in the face. He married a princess. There were a lot of princesses back in ancient Greece. Her name was Megara, and the two had a very happy family. Hera was furious that Zeus's mortal son could have such a happy life. She finally got her revenge by tricking Hercules with an illusion. He thought his family had turned into giant serpents, and so he murdered them. Burdened by guilt, Hercules traveled to the Oracle of Delphi to find a way to free his soul. It's important that I stop here to let you know that the Oracle of Delphi was very real. You can see the Oracle's temple for yourself at Delphi in Greece, where it stands in ruins. The Oracle told Hercules that he needed to serve King Eurystheus for 10 years to purge himself of his guilt. The king gave him 12 labors to perform. They were all incredibly difficult. He had to do things like slay the Hydra, kill a giant lion, capture a bull, steal a girdle from the queen of the Amazons, and beat up a monster. His 11th task was to steal apples from the Hesperides. In Greek myth, the Hesperides were beautiful nymphs living in a paradise far from the civilized world. In the center of their garden, suspiciously like the Garden of Eden, sprouted a massive apple tree. The apples on its branches were pure gold. Hercules had to steal the apples from this tree. It sounds a little bit like the tree that got Adam and Eve kicked out of paradise. At the northwestern point of Africa is an ancient cave called the Caves of Hercules. It was here, in this dark grotto, that Hercules supposedly stopped to rest while on his way to steal the golden apples from the magic garden. Thanks for watching! Do you think Hercules could have been a real historical figure? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. For even more content, be sure to stick around for an older video you might have missed.
El Dorado. The Spanish lust for gold in the beginning of the 16th century gave birth to the legend of El Dorado. Europeans believed that somewhere in South America, hiding in the jungle of the New World, was a place of immense riches and incalculable wealth. According to Jim Griffith, expert folklorist from Tucson, Arizona, El Dorado shifted its location geographically over the years, as Europeans could never agree on where it was. And eventually, El Dorado just became the name of a lost city somewhere in the Americas that nobody has ever found. Interestingly, the origins lie deep in South America at a very real place. When Spanish explorers arrived in the 16th century, they met a tribe of natives living high up in the Andes Mountains of Colombia. When a new chieftain in the tribe took the throne, there was a ceremony at Lake Guatavita, located not far from Bogotá. This lake is still there, and it's a major tourist attraction for people who want to see the source of the El Dorado myth. Accounts from the 16th century claim that during the ceremony, the new chieftain was covered completely in gold dust, and gold treasure and precious jewels were thrown into the lake to appease the mysterious god that lived deep underwater. The Spaniards called the golden chief El Dorado, which translates to the Gilded One. The legend of this chief continued to grow until eventually El Dorado was no longer a person, but a mythical place in the jungle. In reality, the entire myth started just because of a lake supposedly filled with gold. This was so tempting that in 1545, the Spaniards tried to drain the lake. They did end up finding hundreds of pieces of gold all along the edge, but were never able to drain the water enough to obtain all the treasures in the deepest parts of the lake. A god was born. On the ancient island of Crete in Greece, there is a place called Dictyon Cave. It's high up in the mountains, nearly impossible to reach, and is said to be the birthplace of a god. It was inside of Dictyon Cave where Zeus, the great lord of Olympus and the wielder of thunderbolts, was born. Thousands of years ago, the legendary birthplace of Zeus was so popular among the ancient Cretans at the time that a cult sprouted up around the mountains. Pilgrims journeyed to the cave to give worship, and it became one of the most important and sacred religious sites in Greece. The cave is located roughly 3,360 feet on top of the northern side of Mount Dicta. There is a steep set of stairs which lead down the side of the mountain to the lower cave known as Kato Spileo. On the right-hand side lies a massive hall. Some small stone basins in the hall fill with naturally dripping water, and Zeus himself is supposedly said to have drank from them. There is a small lake surrounded by stalagmites and stalactites along the stairwell, and at the back of the hall behind the lake, there lies an even smaller chamber. It was in this small chamber where Zeus was said to be born. King Arthur's birthplace. Archaeologists at the ancient site of Tintagel in the United Kingdom believe they may have just discovered the birthplace of King Arthur. Unlike the birthplace of Zeus, this may have actually been the place where the man behind the legend was brought into the world. Because whereas Zeus may never have actually existed, King Arthur could have. The Tintagel Peninsula in Cornwall was once home to a palace in the Dark Ages. Much of that palace has been destroyed, along with the buildings and other fortifications that had been on the peninsula. And for decades, archaeologists have been busy excavating every last inch, trying to find evidence of the society that lived here. Just recently, archaeologists have made major headway by using ground-penetrating radar. They discovered dozens of structures, including the palace, many of which were probably built in the 6th century, about 1,400 years ago. Many of these structures housed soldiers, artists, and ordinary workers. But whoever lived in the main structure was living a rather glamorous lifestyle. Researchers found evidence of wine imported from Turkey and olive oil from Tunisia and the Greek Isles. They may have also used fancy painted glass cups and plates originating all the way from North Africa. Historian Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote an extensive history of the kings of Britain around the year 1138. In his book, he described King Arthur as being born in Tintagel. And if what the historian said is true, King Arthur would have likely been born inside the most glamorous building, which would be the one with the evidence of a lavish lifestyle. And so, by putting all these pieces together, it looks like this ruined structure could just be where King Arthur actually came from. The gateway to hell. Mount Hekla stands a staggering 4,891 feet tall. It's a stratovolcano in Iceland that occasionally spits out fiery lava, toxic gas, and lava bombs that weigh about 12 tons each. It's one of the scariest places in the world and has erupted throughout history several times. One of these eruptions was in 1104 AD. After the volcano erupted with all its fire and fury, local Icelanders began to believe it was the actual gateway to hell. And ever since then, Mount Hekla has had a prominent place in Icelandic mythology. One of the earliest mentions of the mountain was shortly after its last big eruption in the 12th century. Monk Benedict described the voyages of Saint Brendan in a long poem. And in the poem, he referred to Hekla as the eternal prison of the betrayer of Jesus, Judas. In the 16th century, the great German writer Caspar Pusser claimed the gates of hell were located inside the bottomless abyss of the Hekla volcano. It was such a spooky place for Icelanders that they thought birds flying near the volcano were lost souls. They even believed witches flocked to the base of the volcano on Easter to perform satanic rituals. Big shout out to HT and William Thaxton III for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for letting us be a part of your day. Hope it's a good one, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Tamoanchan. Tamoanchan is a mythological place from the cultures of Mesoamerica, including the Aztecs and the Mayans. The indigenous people of ancient Mexico believed that when a person died, they went to Tamoanchan, which also happened to be the home of the gods. It was described by the Mexican Jesuit Jovan de Tovar as the Aztec equivalent to the Christian Garden of Eden. But here's the thing about Tamoanchan. Unlike the Christian idea of heaven way up in the sky and out of reach, Tamoanchan was a physical place on earth. It was said to be at the top of a mountain, kind of like how Shambala was supposedly hidden in the snow of the Himalayas. But this land was so high up that no mortal could climb the mountain. The only way to reach it was to first journey through the underworld, kind of like Dante's pilgrimage through hell and up to paradise. And so we have to ask, was Tamoanchan an unattainable myth, or was it really located somewhere in Mexico? According to researcher Alfredo Lopez Austin, Tamoanchan was almost definitely located near Cuernavaca in the state of Morelos. It was far enough away from the capital of Mexico City to feel like a place of myth, with its own climate and a lot of different vegetation. Compared to Mexico City, Cuernavaca was a lush and abundant paradise. 2,000 years ago, it could very well have felt like a place of the gods. Delphi. Delphi in Greece is a sanctuary that was once considered to be the navel of the world. It's just a few hours from Athens today, but to the people of the ancient city, it would have felt like a whole world away. The only way to reach Delphi in ancient times would have been by journeying up and over the mountains, through incredibly harsh terrain, only to arrive at a mysterious stone altar on the side of an imposing cliff. It definitely would have felt like a mythical place, a lush natural landscape between two gigantic mountains. Delphi was also one of the most important mystical places for the Greeks. It was home to the Oracle of Delphi, who was even consulted by the Lydian king Croesus before he attacked the Persian Empire. The oracle told the king that if he went to war, he would destroy a great kingdom. Croesus was pleased with this answer, but it turned out to be his own kingdom that was obliterated. There wasn't a single major decision made without consulting the Oracle of Delphi. These days, there are still mythical buildings standing here. There is the Sanctuary of Athena, the Temple of Apollo, and the very platform where the oracle would give her visions of the future. And finally, there's the giant stone which Zeus supposedly put down to mark Delphi as the center of the world. Shambala. Shambala translates from ancient Tibetan as source of happiness. This place is said to be a mythical kingdom hidden somewhere in the snowy peaks of the Himalayas. The kingdom is mentioned in multiple Buddhist texts, including the Kala Chakra Tantra. In Tibetan religious teachings, Shambhala is a major player in the mythology of the future. It's said that from this kingdom of Shambhala, there will come a great and unprecedented army, which will cleanse the world and restore the earth. For some believers, Shambhala is a real place, with some kind of ghostly army preparing to sweep across the world and save it from destruction. Other followers believe Shambhala is more of a spiritual place than a physical one. And yet different followers from various regions all have their own ideas. For example, the Tibetan Buddhists of Western Tibet believe Shambhala is hiding inside the Sutlej Valley, while Mongolian Buddhists think Shambhala is in the valleys of southern Siberia. Some historians even suggest that Shambhala was once the capital of a lost civilization, where peace and prosperity ruled supreme. The mythical castle of Iraq. Deep in the mountains of Iraq, archaeologists in 2022 came across an ancient fortress, which they say was once part of the lost Parthian city of Natunia. This is a remarkable discovery because the existence of the city has only been known to historians because its name was found on some ancient coins. Teams from both Germany and Iraq began investigating the ruins 13 years ago, conducting surveys and excavations in the Zagros Mountains. They used drone technology and boots on the ground to uncover the secrets of the site, but only now have they fully identified the actual castle, and it's nothing short of fantastic. According to the lead researcher Michael Brown from Heidelberg University in Germany, this castle is a real-life Helm's Deep. If you don't know what Helm's Deep is, it's a gigantic fortification set into the side of a mountain in The Lord of the Rings. This is literally a fantasy castle, a monumental fort built of stone in the Iraqi highlands. It was built in a kind of groove inside the mountains, with its huge towers and strong walls filling in the gap between craggy cliffs. It was easily defended because of the terrain and practically impenetrable. Archaeologists have found buildings that served as barracks, other military structures, and even a Zoroastrian sanctuary, which was likely used to worship the ancient Iranian water goddess Anahita. The fortress is about 2,000 years old and really looks like something straight out of a fairy tale. The Temple Church. The Temple Church is a mythical place you can visit right now in London, England. The church is hidden just beyond a gateway on Fleet Street, and its history goes back to the days of the Knights Templar. It's actually sitting within a district called the Temple, which is Britain's main legal district and the center of English law. The way to get there is by getting off the subway at Temple Station. Clearly there's a history here involving the word temple, and it goes back to the Templars. The original church was built by the Knights Templar and was their mythical English headquarters. Thanks to well-kept historical records, we know the church was consecrated on February 10, 1185, by Patriarch Hercules of Jerusalem, at the time of King Henry II's reign over England, who was also in attendance at this consecration. While the Temple Church may not be quite as exciting as the lost castle of King Arthur, it was a very real stronghold used by one of the only legitimate mystical orders of knights that has ever existed in Europe. The Templars used the headquarters as their royal treasury, but it was also a lot more than that. In the 12th century, there was a church, residences for the knights, a military training facility, and recreational grounds where the Templars could hang out and relax. There was even a special place for the novices to spend their time, since they were forbidden to go into the larger city without the permission of the temple master. The only piece of their ancient fortification left is the church, and even that was blown to bits in World War II by the Germans. But it has been rebuilt, and it's still standing today. The Hill of Tara. The Hill of Tara is the most mythical place in all of Ireland, and is often compared to the pyramids in Egypt or Stonehenge in England. It was once the greatest seat of power on the island. Historians believe there were at least 142 kings that sat on the throne and reigned at the Hill of Tara, and that the lineages of these kings may even reach back to prehistoric times. That would mean that the Hill of Tara has been used for potentially over 5,000 years. The hill was not only once the site of a great fortification ruled by kings, but it's also considered a sacred place where gods lived. And through the years, it's been seen as the entrance to the other world, a place where spirits can enter the land of the living. In fact, the Hill of Tara is even directly connected to Saint Patrick, who supposedly came to the site in 433 AD to confront the pagans at a time when Ireland was converting to Christianity. So, what makes this place so special? In truth, it's the hill itself. The name Tara translates to place of great prospect, and a quick journey here really proves the point. On a clear day, you can see nearly half the counties of Ireland from the top of the hill. This would have made it immensely strategic in ancient times, and the perfect place for the king to look out over all of Ireland from his window. Thanks for watching! Which place did you like the most? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon. Bye!